2, 1. Welcome back, guys, to Burning Hands Fantasy Football. We are going to do hypothetical trade destinations for our Sleeper League, or Dynasty Sleeper League. So everyone's got one hypothetical trade for the most part. Some were a little bit difficult to go. Hinty did a better job than I did. But basically, we're going to start with
Wasn't easy.
Hinty's. Huh?
It wasn't easy.
Yeah, it was not easy. This was kind of difficult. But we're gonna start with Hinty's first one, which is a trade between me and yeah, I'm assuming this is Nick Wilburn, right?
Yeah, this is Nick Wilburn.
Yeah. So we've got Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Traylon Burks, my next year's first, and a third in the future for Brandon Cooks and Leonard Fournette. And I'm kind of a big fan of this one because I just don't like Clyde Edwards-Helaire at this point. I'm trying to find a way to offset him. Traylon Burks' value's a little low. I don't know where I'm going to be this year, essentially. So the trades is who knows. And honestly, after this draft, it's like, is there anyone really that great? But what do you think about this trade? Obviously, you're the one that made it. But how did you sort of come up with this?
So I texted I texted a lot of people in the league where I was kind of questionable on what their team is actually going to do this year, and Wilburn's like, I'll be lucky if I win one or two games. So I was like, kept that in mind that he's probably not competing this year, and you have a 27-year-old running back in Leonard Fournette on the Bucks, who this might be their last go round, and then you have an older receiver in Brandon Cooks, who a lot of people don't value him as what he should be. Not that I think that he's like a top 10 receiver or anything, but he's still a talented receiver that can provide depth. And I thought your team, based on, I think regardless of if Watson plays or not, I think you have, with having Herbert in there, you're going to have some consistency at the quarterback play. So I think you'll be fine either way. It's just, if Watson's there, then you're really competing. If Watson's not there, then you're competing. It's just going to be a little bit more difficult. So I thought sending over Clyde, who he's not done what we expected him to do, but he still has that chance because he is on the Chiefs and they got rid of a lot of targets, and those could go to Clyde. You have Burks, who I think you drafted 4th overall, and then a first round pick and a third in the future that would help Nick build his team with depth and talent down in the future.
Yeah, I like the idea of this trade. The one thing I just didn't make a trade for myself just because I'm stuck with this. It's not just. It's really not just Deshaun. It's because it sort of touches on Chubb too, which is my top running back. It sort of adjusts our value here. If Deshaun plays, I think that Chubb is probably gonna be around the same point, but at least long term is a little bit better because I feel like it's gonna be less all on his shoulders this year, and maybe his value will lot less touches. Better chance of long term still being a top guy. So that's sort of a weird spot where I'm at. But I do like this trade. I mean, I would definitely consider it if Nick sent it over. I'm not sure. I feel like I would be getting the better deal here. Just I like Brandon Cooks, Leonard Fournette. The question marks Leonard Fournette is whether he'll either be completely useless next year, because he could. The Bucks are a team that I have a lot of people saying goodbye to. But unless you have anything else you want to talk about, I don't have much to talk about my own team. But I'll have something to discuss with the next trade if you're ready to move on.
Yeah, we can move on.
Okay. So we're going to Nick P, and you have A-Rob to Chris Smart's team for Gabriel Davis and a little bit of a kicker and draft pick to make it a little bit more even. We had a little bit of a different viewpoint on A-Rob, but let's go through that. What do you think about Allen Robinson for this upcoming year?
So for me, I mean, it might just be a little bit of a biasy with him leaving the Bears, but I mean, you have Darnell Mooney, who was able to go for 1,100 yards last year. So to me, I look at Allen Robinson as he may not have it anymore, and he may be past his prime. But there is a lot of hope around him still with being with the Rams. So he could be really good, but you also have his Nick P's team is on the. There's a lot of players that look like they might be on the back end of their career. So I thought that being an Allen Robinson to go out and get a Gabe Davis, who I think has potential in the future. I think that's a smart move. And for Chris Smart on this trade, if I'm wrong and Allen Robinson still has it, you're getting a great piece for something that would be a lot better than Gabe Davis this year. Also, just to note, on Nick P's team, he also does have Van Jefferson.
Yeah, that is a good thing. When I was looking at Nick P's team, I was sort of astonished because it's all top end talent. With Kamara's, I feel like Kamara's suspension sort of just kind of screws him a little bit, and then the Metcalf makes who knows what's going to happen with Metcalf, Cooper if there's no Watson. His team just is kind of he's kind of got screwed. So it's kind of difficult. Jacobs, they didn't sign his 5th year, so it says like let's not play this guy, and then his depth is just very very weak. So my sort of take is that's a good move for him. I think that's a good trade just because you're getting a younger player out of Gabe Davis. But Allen Robinson, I'm a little worried that maybe you're selling him too quickly and his value could rise just because of the Rams. But it's sort of a weird thing. Allen Robinson is just a very strange character, just in a person, in terms of like he could have gone to Green Bay and decided to go to Chicago after years in Jacksonville. It's just sort of a weird move. But sort of what I put in my thing, and I'll pull up Nick P, was just like he needs to make a decision, I guess, on what he wants to do with his team because the depth is so low. Do you mortgage a lot of your future for like a stopgap in let's go back, a stopgap for Kamara just so you can stay ahead this coming year, or do you start maybe trading a guy like Aaron Rodgers, trading a guy like Amari Cooper, trading some guys that like maybe won't have the same value in a year or two, and try to recoup some younger players or some draft picks? Because I really couldn't make a big thing just because I have no idea where he's thinking with his stuff. Whether you want to go all in because you have the top running back or top quarterback and some top running backs, but it falls apart pretty quick when you get down to his depth. But I mean, there's Robert Woods, who should be coming in later, and it's hard to doubt Nick P after his run in the other league and winning with basically nothing at running back all year. But it's a tough one, I think.
Yeah, I mean I agree. I think that he needs to take a look at his roster and figure out if he thinks he's gonna compete this year or not. And there's players on his team that, depending on how the season starts, their value could, like Allen Robinson's a great example where like he could come out and I could be wrong, and then Allen Robinson's value is much more than just Gabe Davis and like a 3rd-round pick, and it's Gabe Davis and like a 2nd or something, or even a 1st. Or Allen Robinson comes out, Van Jefferson beats him for the number 2 spot, and Allen Robinson is basically written off for his career, and you get nothing from him.
Yeah, it's a tough spot, but I feel like you could always bounce back in this weird sleeper league. There's just so many positions and like so
Yeah.
much room for sort of making up weird spots. So we got one through. I think it's going to get a little bit easier. Nick P and one other person we both had issues with finding trades for, but Chris Gregg. We had this is very similar to us. Okay, you have Adam Thielen, who you want to pawn off for Devontae Parker and Naeem Hines with the little draft kicker for it. I actually have him pawning off Adam Thielen as well for Devontae Parker here, but I added a little more into it. I added adding whether he wants to keep Tua, just because will Tua's value stay after this year, and if he doesn't have value next year, he's kind of screwed at quarterback. He's going to have to get a rookie. So Locke and Heineke, there's no way long
Yeah.
term they're going anywhere. So whether you believe in Tua, you can either trade for him and try to get with Stein, or there's one other player that's got 3 good starting quarterbacks who at least have a couple years. Mills may be a question mark, but then I just added Mitchell because Mitchell's a question mark, and so is Saquon, so it's just a little more fun. But I think we're both on point with the. Why'd you pick Devontae Parker? I'm curious.
I picked Devontae Parker as, so I looked at I looked at Adam Thielen and kind of thought about Chris's situation where he does have like some talent on his team, and like he's really just missing depth at this point. I think Tua is a fine QB2. Like I mean, he's not going to be like he's not going to be like Alex's team where he has two quarterbacks I think can finish in the top 5, but that's going to
Yeah.
be kind of rare. So I think trading Adam Thielen, who is on like the real back end, I think he's 32 this season, sending out a 3rd-round pick and grabbing Nyheim Hines, which would just kind of give you like a little bit more depth at running back. And honestly, like I chose Eric's team because Eric has a lot of like running backs like Nyheim Hines with like him, William, two different Williams on his team that I think would be good to go after. And then I just thought Devontae Parker represented that chance for still being competitive and like not just throwing your season away, but also like a potential talent. So
Yeah, and well, I mean, Devontae Parker's only a little bit younger, but he definitely has a lot less tread on his tires than Adam Thielen.
yeah,
I like the idea of selling Thielen now because he's a good. Hey, you can sell it to a team that wants to win now. I don't think Alan Thielen's gonna have a bad year this year, but the clock's ticking on him. And Devontae
yeah,
Parker, there's a potential boom bust. He's a weird player. He's had boom bust all year, all the time, but is going to a place that needs a receiver, and Mac Jones is a young Mac Jones is a young quarterback who could find his new favorite target because it really seems like it's Hunter Henry and everyone else in the Patriots team, and Hunter Henry's not always the most reliable injury wise, so it's a little bit funky.
yeah.
All right. So we've got through. We're moving this pretty quick. I thought this was going to be a little quicker than the last one, which was a little bit long. But another interesting one. So we've got Eric trading off one of his QBs, Deontay Johnson and Robert Tunyon, to Lestrange for Winston, Lazard, C.J. Osborne, and Fryermuth. So some tight end improvement with losing potential, wide receiver. So what made you go for this trade?
So I looked at Eric's team and I saw that he has like, this is where I have like, I'm not huge on his QBs. Like, I love Patrick Mahomes. I think he's solid, but I'm really out on Trevor Lawrence right now. And I think Tannehill kind of falls down to the bottom half of like to me, Tannehill's like a middle of the pack quarterback where I think Jameis Winston has the chance at still being something special, especially with all the weapons that the Saints have given him now. So I thought that would be a little bit of an improvement. And then Connor is very much competing this year. So I thought going out and trading Deontay Johnson, who I expect to have a phenomenal season. I know there's like some concern around the QB situation, but Trubisky had Allen Robinson as a top 12 receiver there for multiple years. And I think Deontay Johnson's just going to be a PPR machine this year. So taking your shot to send out Deontay Johnson, grabbing Alan Lazard and KJ Osborne as like they're not going to put up the numbers that Deontay Johnson will, but you do grab some pieces that help you compete this year. And I really think getting rid of Robert Tunyon and moving him for Pat Fryermuth really, really helps out Eric's team as a long-term tight end solution because he doesn't have one right now. Whereas Connor has Mark Andrews, so having Robert Tunyon in there isn't really a bad like
Yeah,
having to play Robert Tunyon one game a year is not really a bad thing.
yeah, 1 or 2 games a year. Robert Tunyon, he could get you 2 touchdowns, and you're happy. So Lestrange, as defending champion, would help out his team quite a bit. So you're looking at it's funny. It's hard to tell sometimes with like who's the team that is really shooting for it. I think there's a couple teams that are obvious, but I feel like every team is still about half the teams. It's like where do you really go here? I'll pull up my Stein thoughts, and I was just thinking that he offloads one of his QBs just because he has 4 starters. I
Mm-hmm.
just feel like it makes sense just to move off one. Just I don't see the point in having more than 3 starting QBs unless you have one guy that's sort of like either on his way out like Brady or sort of like a shaky start. So I feel like trading out Mills or Tannehill or Lawrence if you're not that high on Lawrence is a good idea just because Tannehill they drafted a QB and Mills at least he's starting this year, so you could at least get a QB needed team like myself, potentially you, or I feel like there's one other team that I mean you could even say Owen if he wants to find someone besides Brady. Actually, he's got Cousins, he's totally fine, but it's a waste of the value is going to die. So that was sort of my idea, and you could find. I think he said. I think I was thinking about just adding to his running back depth, just because outside Eckler and whatchamacallit, he's not. But I guess you could say, yeah, I guess Barkley. I'm not that high on Barkley. I had him, I think, shipping out. I think you had him shipping out too. But it's a tough one for me. It's a lot of just moving quarterbacks for this, just because I find the way I drafted, obviously, I find quarterbacks to be like a very high value player in this league, at least. Um, so you had a little bit more concrete. For me, it's a little bit different with Weinstein. But now we're going to probably the player that we had the least need to trade, who's Alex Herrera. You had him trading off Calvin Ridley, which makes sense just for to Owen, who's not probably going to compete right off the bat for some win now assets in Boyd, Madison, and then a potential just trade kicker. So what do you think about that? Do you think that that value is high enough for Ridley, or I'm not sure I'd
I
give that
mean,
much up for Ridley.
I mean, for a team like Owen, where you're like, you're not competing. When I went through everything, I looked at basically. I think every single team in this league has a chance of winning this year, except for Wilburn and Owen, who are the new expansion teams.
Yeah,
But I think for Owen, if you're looking at the next few years, you could be able to compete. A 2023 third isn't that much. And honestly, I don't see Madison being the future for the Vikings at that position. And I don't see Boyd, I highly doubt that, like, Boyd's contract after this, his next contract is not going to be with Cincinnati. I don't know when that contract comes up, but it's not the future. Whereas getting a player like Calvin Ridley, even though he won't be able to play for your team this year, if you have him whenever he comes back, let's say he comes back next year, and the Falcons end up moving him, and let's say he ends up at the Rams, or he ends up in Green Bay, or there's so much upside chance for Ridley. I think that it's kind of worth just taking your shot on him if you know you're not competing this year.
yeah. I feel like it makes a lot of sense for Owen. Definitely, it's just a good because his Owens. I would say Owens. Whatchamacallits, Owens receivers are just even long term. I'm not crazy about it. Lockett. I feel like the best has passed him by. Sutton is a question mark. I mean, he could be great, but he's not a crowded team. And then Claypool, I just feel like his after his rookie season is just tumbled and tumbled and tumbled, and he really doesn't have that much at receiver. So it's time to really kind of make a push for someone, just anyone really, because a lot of
Yeah.
his team is just I think offloading. I think it makes a ton of sense for both of them. Alex, I actually didn't even say. I basically said about Alex, I was like, you're trading players that have been playing, and I don't even see Calvin Ridley on his team. So I was like, I didn't even realize he had Calvin Ridley, but that makes sense. But I
Yeah.
basically said don't trade anyone because your team is stacked. I feel like he's one of the front runners, if the front runner, just with the strength at quarterback. He's got two great running backs. He's solid at every position, tight end, receiver. I mean, he's got a great team. He's got a good backup quarterback. I really like his team. I wouldn't move too much around unless you want to get a little bit more
Yeah.
depth. You know?
That's kind of where I was at on his team. That's why it was really tough to find a trade. I found Calvin Ridley, and I was like, this is probably one of the very few pieces that you can move to get some more talent in there. Because I mean, I wouldn't trade any of those pieces. Because I mean, I think that he's probably the front run. Him and Connor the Stranger probably the front runners for a title. So
Yeah. Yeah, the Strange already won once, so it's not surprising he'll win again. What was I about to say? Yeah, I like the Madison move just because the running back depth is definitely a little low. I like P Ryan, but Michelle is always a question mark and always funky. And Gaskin is just such a who knows what the hell is going to happen in Miami in terms of running back.
yeah,
So Pierce
I
is
can
nice,
almost
but
guarantee it's not going to be Gaskin.
Yeah, that's the one I'd least. I
Like,
feel like Herrera
they went
always
out
has a
there.
gasket on his team.
I mean, they just went out there and they like the Dolphins went out and they grabbed Edmonds. They grabbed Mostert. It's not going to be Gaskin.
Yeah, very unlikely unless everyone gets hurt and they just have to go to him. So let's go back to. We're on to Connor Lestrange. You have him giving Hollywood Brown up with all the new upside. Hollywood Brown and James Cook up for T. Higgins and a 2023 third. And I think this is like a very fair trade, but I think it's a little bit up towards Chris Smart's given a little bit more value, but I like the idea. How'd you come up with this one?
So, I mean, to me, I looked at Connors was another team that was kind of tough to trade. I do like Hollywood Brown, especially after the move. I think of more upside being with Arizona. However, Connor does have Burrow, and there's no way you're going to go out there and be able to trade for Chase without paying everything. But I think going out and grabbing T. Higgins is very reasonable, and being able to have like T. Higgins on that roster. The third round pick is honestly kind of iffy. You could almost probably drop that, and I feel like the trade might be closer. But and then obviously Chris Smart would then get a running back that has a chance at doing something here in the near future on Buffalo, which is a good team, and grabs a solid receiver in Hollywood, which would just, I mean, it's not going to make up for what T. Higgins is, but it's pretty close. And then James Cook, I think, has a he has a future,
Yeah,
which
you're betting on
uh,
he
which
becomes the starting running back.
when you look at Chris Smart's running backs, it's not the best. So I mean, this trade is definitely probably a little bit more in Connor's favor, but that's also the perspective I was trying to take the trade from. But
Yeah.
I think getting T. Higgins on your roster with having Burrow there would just be so much fun to have that stack.
Yeah, I actually really do like this trade. I actually find Chris Smart to be an underrated team. I really like the idea. I like his front. It's good. It's a little questionable at quarterback, but you'll see what I have a trade for Chris Smart in a little bit that sort of solves that issue. But I like his running backs. The depth is a little bit tough, but it's hard to, you know, be unhappy with Taylor and Mixon. But Higgins, I'm not the highest with Higgins, so I actually think this is a good thing for him to get Brown. You know what you're getting for the most part. It's going to help you out early on the season to make sure you have a good record early on to get in the playoffs, and then you're getting potentially a boomer bust prospect in James Cook that could be a huge boom if he's on. If he becomes the starter and they like him, it's always weird in Buffalo, but it's I like this trade because you're also getting a stronger player in Lestrange for yourself, more consistent definitely out of T Higgins. I think I have one decent for Lestrange. Yeah, another offload. I have him actually trading one of his quarterbacks to me if Watson is out for the year for either Tim Patrick or Trey Sermon, and we do some sort of pick swap for it. I just like the idea. I mean, what do you get? What are you getting with? You don't need both of these guys, Winston and Jones.
Yeah,
Uh, you might as well offload one. I could give you, Geno Smith or whatever you want in the background. But these guys are the definite solid starting quarterbacks, and what you can get is you can get Tim Patrick, who potentially is a decent receiver out of Denver. You never know what's going to happen with Russell Wilson. It's a crowded thing, so it's a chance. And then Trey Sermon, and potentially a pick swap. And the reason why I have Sermon up there is we don't know what the hell is ever going on, I feel like, with the Niners running backs. And it just takes
yeah.
one day for him to have a couple good practices, and maybe he's a gem, but most
He
likely a
just
bust. But what are you losing out of it, Lestrange? What are you losing? Uh, Winston or Jones. It's just dead value because one of them, Jones is probably not going to be the quarterback next year, so might as well sell
yeah.
for something. Um, yeah, I like your trade's a little more fun. It's a little more high risk. Mine's a little bit more low risk, but um, so we're going on to Chris Smart, and you have a smaller one, Nico Collins, and a second round pick for Rashad Penny. And you're a big fan of Rashad Penny. Why'd you? How do you think this works out for both teams?
So for Chris, I mean, I honestly like. I'm not huge on Chris's depth at running back. Um, I know you keep saying you like his team, but I look at his team and it's hard for me to see anyone who really has any value after his first three running backs.
Yeah.
Um, and like, don't get me wrong, Jonathan Taylor, Joe Nixon, and Kareem Hunt, they'll do a lot for your team. But I mean, Joe Nixon just played his first ever full season. Kareem Hunt hasn't played a full season the past 2 years. Um, so I thought going out and grabbing Rashad Penny could provide you the chance of something great, because I mean, at the end of last season, he was on pace for unreal numbers. I think it was like over 2,000 yards and like 28 touchdowns. Now, granted, that was with Russell Wilson and that was on a short sample size, but there's the chance that he is something special. But he's also never really been able to stay healthy. So to me, I looked at it as, all right, this is a player I can go out and get, and there's a chance that he is what he was at the end of last season, and that's phenomenal. But if that happens on Nick Wilburn's team, it doesn't matter. He's not winning a title with the rest of that roster there.
Yeah.
Whereas being on Chris's team, it could be something. And then for Nick Wilburn on the other end, you're not competing this year, so selling a Rashad Penny who could just be a 1 year starter, or he could just be a 4 game. He could start the first game of the year, get injured, and his career is done. So being able to ship off a riskier asset like that for just about anything, grabbing Nico Collins, who has a chance to be something at wide receiver for Houston moving forward after like being the number 2 or even being like eventually being the number 1, and then grabbing a second round pick in a draft next year would help him in the future.
Yeah, I always feel like the one thing that people underrate is like, oh, this guy was on that crappy team. He's not going to be worth much. But there's always people that produce even on the crappy teams with like the Nico Collins move. So I do understand that move. It's a lot. I feel like I would need a little bit more out of second's not bad, but I probably want like a second and another third for like the following year. It makes a lot of sense for both teams. Just I do understand where you're going with that. So which one was this one? This was Chris Smart. So Chris Smart,
Yeah.
I think I had a funny one for Chris Smart. I think it was my first one. Yeah. So my Chris Smart one is trade for Tom Brady. I think it makes a ton of sense. His quarterbacks aren't that great. I think his team. I'm a little bit higher on Chris Smart's team than you are. I don't really care that much about the depth of that much, and I kind of like Kenyon Drake. I like the idea of Kenyon Drake. I thought he played decently well when he had the chance, and the fact that there's just such a weird thing going on in the Josh McDaniels regime and how they kind of play running backs in New England. Maybe it'll convert over to that. I just like the idea of just either trading Pickett or Wentz or both, and then potentially some more younger. You could either trade like one of your rookies or a more draft picks over to Owen, who's basically what I have for Owen is basically just launching Tom Brady into the sun because he's not going to win this year. So why do you have a guy that's literally on his swan song playing for you?
Yeah.
You got to unlock the thing. So I feel like just bid your draft picks and whatever Kenny Pickett if you want to give up Kenny Pickett, because the question is whether you want to how confident you are in Pickett and how confident you are in the Steelers, whether they'll keep him around. It's a weird one with Pickett because it's the Steelers never move on from anyone, from head coach to quarterback or for whatever. So is he stable enough, or do you want to go for it all with Tom Brady this year with this really? I mean, I think he's got a stacked front because especially because you got Kelsey, who what's Kelsey going to be in a year or two? Um,
Yeah.
Mixon in a year or two, what is he going to be? Wilson, last 2 years, the guy that's won the Super Bowl has been the quarterback that's moved teams. So it just kind of feels like a team that like, maybe our best chance to win right now is going for it all right now. But I do also like the idea of maybe potentially trading. I think you brought up Gabe Davis for some running back could help too. But
Hmm.
I love his starting lineup. So I just feel like go for it this year, and how many times are you gonna rebuild or hope that you're gonna have a good team?
Yeah.
All
All right.
right, plowing through these. Nick Wilburn. You have him
Yeah.
trading. We have a similar trade here. Matt Stafford and Leonard Fournette for Jalen Hurts and Damian Pierce and a second round pick. So, what made you want Nick Wilburn to make this trade?
Uh, Basically just moving for youth. Basically,
Yeah,
you have Stafford who's 36. You have Fournette who is 27 and potentially in his he's on the Buccaneers, which if this is Brady's last season, which there's a chance that it is, as in every year basically at this point until he officially turns like 75 years old, there's a chance that it could be his last year. And with that being said, Fournette, like for me, like we did the running back episode last or the rankings last week, I have Fournette as a top 10 running back. Where I mean, I just think being able to, if you were to ship Fournette and Stafford over, that would be enough to be able to get a Jalen Hurts who is young, talented, and has a bright future. But at the same time, it basically locks up Alex's running back room. Like, Alex's running back room would be insane on his end with Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, Leonard Fournette, and David Montgomery. Like, at that point, he would have three of my top 10 running backs and like four in my top like 15.
yeah,
So it would give him a ton of depth at a position where there's a high likelihood of injury. And Stafford was the number 6 quarterback last year, and it was his first year with this team, and he threw 17 interceptions. There's a good chance that goes down. There's a chance all of his passing numbers go down, but for sure his interceptions will. But if he maintains his touchdown numbers and like he's not going to be a quarterback that hurts you. I think even last year, like in his bad games, he was putting up like 14, like 12 to 14 points. And with his other quarterback being Lamar Jackson, I think he'd still be able to stabilize it and just really solidify the running back room. So for there, I thought it was a good enough move for Alex to be able to make that move, and then Nick Wilburn just gets a stud, like a stud quarterback, stud young quarterback, and then some draft capital. And honestly, Damian Pierce, I don't think he's going to be anything special, but he provides you youth at the running back position.
yeah. It's a hope and a dream, but I mean, I really agree with this trade. It makes a lot of sense. And Stafford potentially you could say he's gonna be better. He's gonna have um, less pressure, like new team, all this pressure. I'm in LA. I have to perform. He just won a Super Bowl. He's been riding high. He can play with like a lot more confidence, and he's got pretty much the same. I mean, there's not that much of a difference team. He should have better running back play. He's going to have a little bit worse O line and pretty similar receivers. I mean, he had Robert Woods, and now it's going to be Allen Robinson. I think that's a similar, not super different, as long as A Rob is not what he was last year, what he was most of the rest of his career. But I love the idea of Leonard Fournette just moving, just because it's time for Dad to try to make some. Obviously, he's in a youth thing. He's a lot of young players, so it's time to just move towards that youth. And the one trade that I sort of made for him was I added Fournette, and I said, why not just do? I had a couple ones. You could either trade Brandon Cooks and Hunter Renfro, which I had Brandon Cooks a little bit older. Renfro's a little bit scary, and I'm not sure if his value is as high as it should be because now everything's changing in Vegas. But and also Devontae Adams doesn't help. But I basically said Mike Evans and Fournette. You have two. I mean, Evans isn't old, but two guys on the same team that are on a team that's probably on the downward spectrum for the next like 3 or 4 years, which is when you're thinking your team's going to get good, and try to trade them for a blue chip running back. And I mean, even like a pick or two. I'm not sure you'll be able to get Najee Harris, which I had, just because who knows how tight people are going to want to keep a Steelers running back. But I mean, I think you could get like even a guy like Joe Mixon, a guy. I mean, I wouldn't go for Eckler, but that 27 number you mentioned that seems young, but that's the number when running backs sort of that's when their career sort of starts to fall down. I
Yeah.
mean, generally that's not they don't do a lot of unless you're Adrian Peterson or some freak, and I know Fournette's a freak a little bit, but he's had a weird career. I think it's time for him to say, let's get rid of these older players, which Stafford makes sense, and get in some young people because you're going to be he has a chance to compete in a couple of years because he just has some really young players. And I also thought
Yeah.
about Gallup, but my one Gallup trade didn't work because the other team had a lot of Cowboys receivers, so it didn't exactly
Just
work correctly.
just in general, looking at Wilburn's roster for the future, if I was him, I'd be looking to move Stafford probably before the season. Um, I don't think you'll get the value you need for Derek Carr, and I think he's a stabilizing piece at quarterback, so I'd probably hold on to him. I think moving on from Garoppolo, if Garoppolo gets traded, make that move. And then at running back, I'd say the big ones are try and find a way to move on from Fournette, try and find a way to move on from Penny, try and find a way to move on from basically all of his running backs. I would be trying to move on from and trying to find younger talent for the future. So if anyone really offered younger talent at running back and offered like some draft capital, I would definitely do that for him. I think the only running back I probably wouldn't do that for would be Ramondre Stevenson.
Mm-hmm.
And then wide receiver, you and I disagree on uh, Mike Evans. I think Mike Evans will overcome the lack of Brady after this season. So that's
Yeah,
just,
I don't think
I
it's
mean,
so much. I think Evans is going to be bad, but it's just a high value player that you can add to get a running back. Just because he has, besides Fournette, I mean, it's Penny, and his other guys Robinson. Robinson's probably not even is he going to start? Like he's got no one at
no,
running back really.
Robinson's not going to play this year. So
Yeah, so I feel like it's just
yeah,
I have to put out value to get a running back,
yeah.
or
Which is
even
why whenever I had him trading Fournette, I had him trading for Pierce, who I think will end up getting the starting job there because Marlon Mack is there and Rex Burkhead is there, but Rex Burkhead is old and Marlon Mack is coming off. He's on year 2 of an Achilles, and we've never seen someone recover from that and actually be productive.
yeah. And Mac was good, but he wasn't a star or anything like that. But yeah, he's got some decisions to make. But I think that's the fun teams are the expansion teams really, because there's so
Yeah.
much you can do with it. All right, we're gonna move on to Owen, and you have a small little trade here: Cordell Patterson for Trey Sermon and a third-round pick.
So real quick for Owen's team, I asked him how he was gonna like what his thoughts were for the season, and he said he's a rabid cornered animal fighting to not be in the bottom 2 places. He's trying to fight for a middle of the pack and like basically not be at the bottom come the end of the season. Which that's a good goal. Um, honestly, when I look at his team, I see like I chose Cordero Patterson because I thought the quarterbacks were a little bit too like they were kind of easier, and I already have another trade where I try and acquire one of his where I'm going after one of his QBs, but I definitely think trying to find a way to move Brady this season or move Cousins this season, I think both of those would be good moves. And then running back wise, I think like I don't think that he should move on from any of these players before the season. Every other trade, basically, except for Nick Wilburn, and actually even Nick Wilburn's, I'd probably do that one pre-season starting if I was him. Owen's the only roster that I looked at and said a lot of his players will gain value after the season starts. So for me, I like even the Cordero Patterson trade. I'm not making that until week 2, like after week 1 is over. But I thought this trade made sense. It gives him a running back piece, and it gives him a shot at a future running back that could be something for San Francisco. Gets rid of Patterson, who I like, and I think he'll be phenomenal for the first 8 games of the year this year. But then after that, I don't know what's going to be left in the tank, and then just more draft capital for his team. But
Yeah,
I would if I was him, I'm trying to trade. Definitely trying to trade Brady, Cousins, Gordon, Patterson, Singletary, Madison, and then Boyd, Galladay, like trying to ship some pieces off once the season starts and they get a little bit more value. Just knowing that the value is not what it used to be, and just trying to build for the future. But I also know that he wants to compete, so maybe waiting until closer to the trade deadline, he'll get more value for a lot of these pieces because he'll be able to trade them to teams that are competing this year and they'll know they're competing.
Yeah, I don't think he'll have that much of an issue getting in the middle of the pack. I mean, he has good running backs: Dobbins, Brees Hall. I like Samir White. I think that's like a good one just because that's the guy they drafted, and who knows what the hell's happened to the Raiders. Madison's solid. Gordon, I think both of us really like. The quarterbacks, I mean, he's got four good quarterbacks. I mean, Zach Wilson might be gone soon just because he's a Jets quarterback, but at least for the next 2 years, I think he's going to at least be a viable backup. And if you have Cousins, Brady, or Jones, trade one of those guys, not Jones, obviously. But I mean, that's solid. His receivers are a little bit wonky. That's sort of where I find his issue. He's got a ton of tight ends. Um, Basically, my obstacle was just I think trading Tom Brady for a bunch of draft picks or a receiver or something like that, or running back, makes a lot of sense. I think one thing you don't want to do is like trade a guy like Galladay or even Boyd. I'd probably wait and hope that they start off strong, just like you were saying. It's just weird with Galladay. It's like this guy obviously has the talent, but
Yeah.
he's on the Giants and he's a little injury prone. Um, I mean, he's got Dotson. He's got a lot of guys that like you could wait. I think obviously trading one of the Patriots tight ends makes some sense. He's just got a lot of tight ends. Albert O, I think you get decent value for, even pretty early on or even now. I mean, I like Albert O as just the tight end for Russell Wilson. It just makes a lot of sense. He's just got a lot of middling tight ends, but I feel like that's an issue with a lot of people. But for me, I think I just wrote pretty much. I think it was all caps unload Brady to the highest bidder. Yeah, that's what I wrote. So
Yeah.
it's just trading your old people for some young people.
For me, I like even with Brady, like I'm waiting until midway through the season. Maybe you have like Alex Herrera's team, maybe Jalen Hurts and uh, Jackson both get injured, and then you have a team that desperately needs a like an elite QB to stay in the picture. And I still think Brady's up there, and you could get a first out of Alex for Brady to try and win this year, and that'd be you're not getting a first for Brady right now with no injuries or anything.
Yeah, it makes sense. I like that idea because I feel like most of his players are going to perform well, but long term, it's a lot of question marks. So it's like, how can I maximize my value here just as an expansion team? But I don't think he's in a
And
bad spot.
I think the three players that he can get the most value out of and that are worth shipping out, I really think are Cousins, Gordon, and Brady.
Yeah, I like the idea of Cousins and Brady. It's just who wants it. It's just going to be someone's personal preference, really. Because I obviously want Cousins more, but some people would be fine with just winning now with Brady. Um, all right, I think we're going to last one. That's you. You're talking about trading Sam Howell and a second for Kirk Cousins. How are you going to pull this one off?
I mean, it was just like I'm trying. Like honestly, like I spent the least amount of time on mine, and
Yeah,
it was just kind of more like, all right, he's got QBs. My team's biggest need is probably a QB fix, but I also don't know if that's really what I need or not because the season's not started yet, and I don't know what Trey Lance is going to be. If Trey Lance comes out week one and he finishes a top six QB, then there's no reason for me to go out and get a new QB.
yeah,
So there's no reason for me to like sell my team right now to try and go out and get like a top 12 quarterback. Whereas, and like, so if I was trying to make a trade right now, like that'd be all the more I'd be willing to offer. So,
yeah. I kind of like the concept of the trade. I'm not like a fan of like the actual trade itself, but I think the issue you're sort of at is how long do you think Matt Ryan's going to last there, and how productive is he actually going to be in Indianapolis? Because I think Trey
yeah.
Lance, I'd bet on Trey Lance being at least just with his running ability like a viable starter. So whether you want to go
Well, I
for
mean, the other thing is too is like on my bench I have Justin Fields. So
yeah,
like, what is Justin Fields' future? Like, how is that going to play out? So it's not worth me mortgaging my future when I don't know what I have already. Like,
yeah,
because
I think you go ahead.
I was going to say like last year, like Justin Fields had multiple games as a top 10 quarterback. So going out of my way, like, granted, I think he kind of had more weapons last year, but did he really? Because we just talked about Allen Robinson was absolute garbage last year. So how much value is Allen Robinson actually providing on the field? Um, I know we didn't add any weapons, but like honestly, if the play calling is just not half as bad as it was last year because they didn't let Justin Fields run for the first half, like there's a chance that he's better than people are expecting. And if he's a middling quarterback, and then I get Matt Ryan as a middling quarterback, and Trey Lance is like good, then there's no reason for me to go out and try and spend a first for someone like Kirk Cousins or anything like that.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's just difficult. I guess the issue is where do you think Justin Fields is going to be? And I think the difference between Fields and Lance is just the Niners. We know they're going to be good, and the Bears, they're probably going to be
We know we're
bad.
going to be bad.
Yeah, like I've seen some people mocking the Bears at like 2 wins. So it's like, how bad are they really going to be? How good is this new Bears regime going to be? Are they going to be actually going to be able to keep him up, or is he going to be one of these quarterbacks that just gets screwed? Um, I think
And
like
then
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to go ahead because I was going to switch the position.
Okay, so I think what mine was just whether your certainty or uncertainty of because I don't know if Brissett's the long term trading some sort of package of Brissett and another quarterback, probably Fields or Ryan. Well, definitely Fields or Ryan, one of the two. For a guy like Kirk Cousins, and then getting some more assets back in terms of like running back or receiver, just because it's just do I want to deal with this question mark? But for you, it's a little different because Fields is a Chicago Bear and you're a Bears fan, so it's
Yeah,
a little bit
honestly,
different.
like that's kind of a killer for me because I know Fields is a great piece to try and trade right now for what he could be, but I'm a Bears fan. There's 0% chance that I'm going to let him get off my roster.
Yeah, because if
Um,
he ends up being
because
great and you lose him,
yeah,
yeah,
if he ended up being a top, like if he ends up becoming like a top 12 or a top 6 QB, I'm going to hate myself, and I just can't do that.
yeah,
But and then obviously outside of QB, I think my team is probably up there with most other teams in the league. So
yeah. I think you just have a solid team. It's just whether that second QB, if Lance struggles early on, but I feel like Lance, I think he's just going to put up good numbers. Just even if he's not good a passer, I mean, it's a good team. They'll run the ball. He'll get some rushing yards and some rushing touchdowns. I'm not really worried about Lance. I'm more worried about Ryan, to be honest. Yeah. So, anything else you want to bring up? This was a very hypothetical and difficult concept to do.
yeah, this was a pain in the ass. So I hope some of the people in the league actually take the trades, modify them a little bit if you don't like them, and try and get some more trading going on in this league. I think I'm the only. I think I've made the most trades in the league, followed by like Chris Gregg because I've traded with him the most.
Yeah, it's just tough because there's so many.
There's so many variables with like long term outlook of like players and all of that. So it is difficult, but
Yeah, my mind
I
only
def-
wraps around the quarterback, so basically all mine quarterbacks. Just makes it simpler. If there's a quarterback involved, it makes the trade a little bit easier to understand. All right. I think we're good to go. I think next week we're actually going to do our first live podcast, and we're doing something interesting: sleepers and busts.
next year is sleepers and busts.
All right. We'll see you guys that next week.